Chapter 1: The House That Never Waited for Me. They left him alone in a freezing house, replaced his pain medicine with water, and went on vacation like nothing was wrong. 3 days later, they came home expecting sympathy. What they found instead was his ashes, a lawyer, and proof they never knew existed. I'm your host, and this is not a story about anger. This is a story about family, betrayal, and a revenge that was completely legal. I flew in on the last Thursday of October 2024 with a carry-on that still smelled like disinfectant and stale airport coffee. 3 months on the road, moving between hospice partners across the Midwest, fixing quiet problems families never noticed until it was already too late. I did not come back because I missed home. I came back because Walter Sloan was on week 13 of comfort care, and his pulmonologist had said it could be days. The drive from the airport to the neighborhood in Bucks County felt longer than usual. Most of the trees were already bare, the rest clinging to leaves that rattled in the cold wind. When I turned onto the cul-de-sac, the house stood out immediately. No porch light, no glow from the windows. The kind of dark that does not look like someone is sleeping, it looks like someone has left. I parked and sat there for a moment, hands still on the steering wheel. No television noise, no music. Just cold air and distance. I told myself people forget lights all the time. Then I opened the door. The cold hit first. Sharp indoor cold, the kind that seeps into your bones. Then the smell. Ammonia, damp carpet, old medication, and something underneath it that made my stomach tighten. Neglect has a smell. Once you recognize it, it never leaves you. I dropped my bag and moved inside, flicking the light switch. Nothing. Another switch. Still nothing. My breath fogged as I walked farther in. Walter was in the living room recliner, angled toward a blank television. A thin throw blanket covered him like it was supposed to be enough. His skin was gray. Not pale, gray. His lips were cracked. Each breath came shallow and uneven. When his eyes found mine, he tried to smile. It was not relief, it was apology. I crossed the room and knelt beside him, fingers finding his wrist automatically. Weak pulse, cold skin. I glanced toward the oxygen concentrator in the corner. Silent. The tubing lay coiled on the floor. I spoke quietly, steady. "Walter, it is me." His eyelids fluttered. He looked toward the hallway as if checking whether someone was there. Then he whispered my name. I pulled the blanket higher, then stood and went straight for the thermostat. Dead screen. I checked the breaker box in the garage, flipped 2 half-tripped switches. Nothing. My hands stayed steady, but my jaw ached from clenching it. Back in the living room, my phone flashlight caught details I did not want to see. A half-empty water glass with dried residue, a pill organizer left open, days blending together, a damp towel draped over the couch arm. The carpet beneath the recliner was darker than the rest. I went closer, and the smell worsened. He had been sitting in it. I leaned in and spoke near his ear. "You are not alone. I am here." His fingers moved slowly, searching. I took his hand. Paper-thin skin over bone, cold at the tips. I should have called an ambulance. Part of me wanted flashing lights and witnesses and consequences. But I also knew what that ride would do to him. The noise, the waiting, the loss of dignity when what he wanted was quiet. I turned toward the kitchen searching for answers. That was when I saw the note. 1 sheet of notebook paper held down by a salt shaker. Patrice's handwriting, neat and casual. "Lila, Grant, and I needed a reset. We drove down to Savannah for a few days. The air will do us good. You can keep an eye on Walter. There's soup in the pantry." No medication list, no hospice schedule, no phone number. At the bottom corner was the date, 10 days ago. My throat tightened. I went back to Walter. Where are they? His eyes dropped. Gone, he whispered. Gone where? I made a small motion with his hand, like brushing something away. I moved fast. The pantry held canned soup and peanut butter, no protein shakes, no prepared meals. The fridge had condiments, eggs, and limp lettuce, nothing for someone who could not cook, stand, or remember. I grabbed a thick blanket from the hall closet and wrapped it around him, tucking it beneath his feet. He sighed, the sound small but undecidedly relieved. Focus, I told myself. Warmth, fluids, oxygen. I tried another outlet for the concentrator. Nothing. I checked my phone. A utility notice showed power restoration had been completed the day before, so it wasn't the neighborhood. It was this house. I called the hospice case manager. "This is Evan Park," he answered, already tired. "Evan, it's Lila Sloan. I'm at Walter's house. What happened?" There was a pause. "Lila, I came twice this week, Tuesday and Thursday. No one answered. I called Patrice, left messages. I documented disrupted care due to lack of family access." Disrupted care, the polite phrase. "How long since the last visit?" 10 days, he said. "Patrice told us you'd be here." I stared at the dead lamps and the silent machine and the man fighting for breath on the recliner. She planned this. Evan lowered his voice. "Do you need emergency services?" I looked at Walter. His eyes were open, watching me, waiting to see if I would decide he was worth the trouble. "Not yet," I said. "I need the dates, everything you documented." He listed them methodically. I wrote them down. When I ended the call, the house felt even quieter. I stood in the center of the living room, cold seeping through my shoes, and the truth settled with painful clarity. This was not forgetfulness. This was not confusion. This was a decision repeated every day for 10 days to leave a dying man in the cold and call it a break. I turned back to Walter and squeezed his hand. "I'm going to fix this," I said softly. "First, I'll get you warm. Then I'll find out what they thought they were doing." He closed his eyes, trusting me with the last of his strength. I stayed there beside him, listening to each shallow breath as the cold house pressed in and the clock in my head started ticking. His breathing was a thin, uneven thread, and I could feel the room getting colder with every minute I waited. I forced myself to move. If I stayed frozen beside him, nothing changed. So I stood, rolled up my sleeves, and turned the house into a checklist. Warm water first. I filled a basin in the bathroom sink and carried it back like I was transporting something fragile. Walter tried to help when I lifted him, pride still flickering under the weakness, but his legs buckled and his body shuddered with pain. "I got you," I said, keeping my voice steady. He squeezed my fingers like he was apologizing for needing me. In the bathroom, I washed him gently, one careful section at a time, talking the whole time so he would not feel like an object. His skin was cool and too thin, and the bruises on his hips looked like they had been there for days. When I changed him into clean clothes and eased him into bed, he let out a sound that was half relief, half humiliation. "I am sorry," he whispered. "Do not be," I said. "Not for this." I stripped the sheets and started the washer, then found extra blankets and layered them like armor. I warmed broth on the stove, the gas burners lighting with a sharp click that made me exhale for the first time since I walked in. At least we had gas. I carried the mug into the bedroom and helped him sit up. "Small sips," I said. "Slow." He tried, but every swallow made him stop and breathe through the pain. His chest rose in shallow little jerks like his body had forgotten how to do it smoothly. "Hurts," he said, the word barely there. I nodded, already reaching for the medication list that should have been on the counter. There was none. I went to the living room and opened the cabinet by the television, then the drawer table beside the recliner. A stack of mail, coupons, a remote with dead batteries, then a plastic basket with bottles and pill packs. The opioid liquid was there. The label was intact, the pharmacy information clear, the expiration date months away. I shook it gently. It sounded wrong. Too light. Too watery. I held it up to my phone flashlight. The liquid was nearly clear. My stomach dropped. I had handled this medication in hospice settings for years. I knew the color, the thickness, the bitter smell that clung to your fingers even after you washed your hands. This looked like someone had poured water in and called it mercy. I unscrewed the cap and touched the tiniest drop to my fingertip. No bitterness, no smell, just water. I went back to the bedroom with the bottle in my hand. Walter's eyes followed it. I did not ask at first. I let my face answer the question. He closed his eyes and nodded once. "How long?" I said quietly. He swallowed, wincing. "Patrice said it was too expensive, said we had to stretch it." "Stretch it," I repeated, tasting the words like poison. He did not look at me. "Said pain is part of it anyway," he whispered. "Said I should be grateful she is still here." Something hot and sharp surged up my throat, and I pressed it back down. I had learned in my job that anger can help you move, but it can also make you sloppy. Sloppy gets people hurt. I set the bottle on the nightstand like it might explode. "I will call hospice," I said. "We will get you what you need." He caught my wrist with surprising urgency. "Do not make trouble," he murmured. "She will get mad." I stared at him. Even now, he was afraid of upsetting her. Even now, he was protecting the person who had hollowed out his last days. "Walter," I said softly, "you are allowed to be comfortable. That is the whole point." He blinked slowly. "I don't want to be a burden." "You are not," I said, and my voice cracked on the last word. I turned away before he could see what was happening to my face. In the hallway, I took one breath, then another, and went back to the living room to keep looking. The wall above the fireplace was bare, lighter where sunlight had faded the paint around a frame that was no longer there. I remembered that shadow box. I had seen it for years. Medals, a faded photo of Walter in uniform, a folded flag after his first wife died. I opened the drawers in the console. Nothing. I checked the closet in the hallway. Nothing. I went back to Walter's room and crouched beside the dresser. "Where is the shadow box?" I asked. He stared at the ceiling, his mouth tightening. "She sold it," he whispered. "Online. $500. $500, I repeated, hearing my own voice like it belonged to someone else. He swallowed. "Said it was just metal. Said it wouldn't save me." My hands went numb. I stood up too fast and had to steady myself on the doorframe. I could feel the house closing in again, not from the cold, but from the weight of what I was seeing. I walked into the kitchen and braced my palms on the counter. The sink was full of dishes that had been sitting too long. The air smelled faintly sour. I stared out the dark window and forced myself to breathe in through my nose, out through my mouth. Controlled, measured, the way I taught nurses to do during a crisis. My phone was still in my hand. I opened social media without thinking, like my thumb already knew where it wanted to go. There it was. Grant Whitaker, smiling in a sunlit selfie, wearing sunglasses that looked too expensive for someone who had been complaining about bills. His arm was around a younger woman with glossy hair and a bright, practiced smile. The caption was smug and breezy, talking about living your best life. My jaw clenched hard, my teeth hurt. I clicked to the next photo. A deck railing, blue water, a drink with a tiny umbrella. Grant again, laughing, like the world owed him happiness on demand. Then I opened my banking app, First Federal Credit Union, and my chest tightened as the numbers loaded. Withdraw after withdraw, resort charges, restaurants, shopping, Small amounts that added up fast, the kind of spending you do when you believe someone else will handle the consequences. The dates lined up with the note on the table. 10 days. I scrolled farther and saw a charge that made my vision narrow. A pharmacy copay refund processed 3 days after the opioid prescription was filled, as if the medication had been returned or adjusted, as if someone had done paperwork while Walter lay in pain. I could hear my own heartbeat, slow, heavy, controlled fury. In my head, I heard Grant's voice from years ago when we were still married and he wanted me to stay quiet at his mother's dinner table. You always have to be right, Lila. You always have to make things uncomfortable. Why cannot you just let it go? I had let a lot go. I had apologized for the way I spoke, the way I asked questions, the way I refused to smile when someone lied to my face. I had swallowed my instincts because being agreeable was easier than being alone. And now a man was dying in the dark because other people found comfort more important than responsibility. I went back to the bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed. Walter's breathing had not improved. His fingers were curled into the blanket like he was trying to hold on to something solid. "It hurts," he whispered, ashamed, like admitting pain was a moral failure. I leaned closer. "I'm going to make some calls," I said. "Hospice first, then the pharmacy, then whomever I need to." His eyes opened wider. "Patrice will be angry," he said. "Let her be angry," I said, and surprised myself with how calm it came out. "She's not the one lying here." He studied me as if he had never seen me this way before. In a way, he hadn't. For years, I had been the one smoothing things over, the one making excuses, the one trying to keep the peace. Peace was not what this house needed. It needed truth. I stood and picked up the clear bottle from the nightstand again, holding it up so he could see it. "This is not medicine," I said quietly. "This is water." His lips pressed together. Tears pooled at the corners of his eyes, not from sadness, from exhaustion. He looked away, like he could not bear to watch me confirm it out loud. I set the bottle down with care, like evidence. Then I walked back into the living room and stared at the empty recliner, at the dark stain on the carpet, at the dead thermostat. 10 days. No lights, no heat, no comfort meds. A man in hospice left to endure pain in silence. I felt something settle inside me, heavy and clear. If I did nothing, this would not end with neglect. It would end with torture. I reached for my phone again and scrolled to Evan's number, my thumb hovering for a second before I pressed call. The line rang twice before Evan answered, his voice careful, like he already knew this call mattered. "I am on my way back to the office," he said. "Tell me what you are seeing." I told him everything without softening it. The cold house, the dead thermostat, the clear liquid in a bottle that was supposed to dull pain, the 10 days with no visits. Evan went quiet for a moment, then said he would update the file immediately and flag it as urgent. He asked if Walter was lucid. I said sometimes. He told me to keep notes, dates, times, anything I could remember. When I ended the call, I opened the Notes app and started writing. Not feelings, facts. The day the note was written, the date on the pharmacy label, the timestamps on the bank charges, the nights the heat had been off. I wrote like I was preparing a report because that was the only way to keep my hands from shaking. I needed one more piece, a witness who was not me. I stepped outside into the cold and walked next door. The porch light came on before I knocked, and Ruth Halverson opened the door wrapped in a cardigan, her hair pulled back like she had been getting ready for bed. "Lila," she said, surprised, "I saw your car." "I need to ask you something," I said. "Have you seen Patrice or Grant this past week?" Ruth frowned and leaned against the doorframe. "No, not since they left. I saw their car go early one morning. I thought they were heading out of town." "How long ago?" She thought for a second. "At least 10 days. I almost called someone when I did not see lights on at night, but I did not know if it was my place." "Did you hear anything? Anyone coming by?" She shook her head. "Nothing. I assumed you were here." I thanked her and went back inside, my breath fogging as the door closed behind me. Another fact added to the list. That night, after Walter finally slept, I drove across town to a small law office with a light still on. Dana Klein had been Walter's attorney for years, the kind who specialized in planning for things people did not like to think about. She looked up when I walked in, took one look at my face, and motioned me to sit. "I was wondering when you would come," she said. She opened a thick folder and slid it across the desk. Inside was a living trust dated 12 years earlier, signed long before Patrice entered Walter's life. The assets were listed plainly: a house in Virginia that Walter had never sold, investment accounts held with a large national firm, bonds, funds. The total made my chest tighten. "Patrice does not know about all of this," Dana said. "She receives the monthly pension. That is what she is used to." Dana flipped to another page. "Walter also signed a health care proxy and designated you for final arrangements. It's all valid." "What is the risk?" I asked. "Time," she said. "If he loses capacity before we act, they can challenge anything." I told her about the medication, about the heat, about the note. Her mouth pressed into a thin line. "We need one more thing," she said. "Proof of intent." I knew what she meant. We sat side by side at her desk while I called Patrice on video. Before the screen connected, I said clearly that I was recording the call. Patrice did not object. She adjusted her camera and smiled like nothing was wrong. "How is he?" she asked, glancing away. "He is weaker. Breathing is harder." She sighed. "He has been like that for a long time." I told her hospice had missed visits. She shrugged. "They are always so dramatic." Grant leaned into frame, smirking. "You always make things bigger than they are, Lila." I asked about the medication. Patrice waved her hand. "It cost a fortune. We had to make it last." Dana wrote quickly beside me. When the call ended, Dana closed the folder and looked at me. "If he is lucid," she said, "we can change the distribution tonight." I drove home in silence. The house was still cold, still quiet. Walter was awake, his eyes clearer than I'd seen all day. "Did you do it?" he asked. "I can, if you want me to." He nodded once. "Do not let them do this again." I took his hand and felt the steadiness return to my breath as the path ahead finally came into focus. Chapter 4. The Signature That Ended Everything. Walter's grip was weak, but the meaning behind it was not. His eyes stayed on mine as if he was handing me something he had carried for too long. Dana sat her briefcase on the coffee table and pulled out a thin stack of documents, then laid them flat like she was building a bridge across a cliff. "We do this slowly," she said. "We do this clean." Walter swallowed. "I am here," he whispered. "I know what I am doing." Dana glanced at me. "I want a hospice nurse to confirm orientation. It protects you." I called Evan and asked if he could send someone immediately, even if it meant waking them. An hour later, a night nurse arrived with tired eyes and a clipboard. She checked Walter's name, the date, where he was, who we were. Walter answered in a whisper, but his answers were steady. The nurse looked at Dana and nodded. Dana turned the page toward Walter and spoke in a calm voice, every word measured. "This is an amendment to your living trust. It changes the distribution. I need you to tell me what you want, in your own words." Walter drew in a shallow breath. "Patrice and Grant," he said, then paused as if the names hurt. "They left me. They took the pain medicine. They let me freeze. I do not want them to get anything." Dana did not flinch. "And who do you want to benefit?" "A veterans fund," he said. "Someone who helps the ones who come home and get forgotten." Dana nodded. "And the rest?" Walter's eyes moved to me. For a second, he looked ashamed. Then he looked certain. "Lila," he whispered. "She stayed." I felt my throat tighten, but I kept my face still. Dana slid the final pages into place. "This section states the reason," she said quietly. "Abandonment and harm during end-of-life care. It matters. It is not emotion, it is fact. Walter nodded once. His hand shook as he took the pen. The nurse leaned in, ready to steady him, but Walter lifted his chin like he wanted to do this on his own. The signature was uneven, slow, and absolutely his. Dana signed. The nurse signed. I signed where Dana told me to, not as a beneficiary, but as a witness to the moment. When it was done, Dana gathered the pages, slid them into a folder, and exhaled. "All right," she said. "It is executed." Walter's eyelids fluttered. "Done," he whispered, like he could finally rest. Dana touched his shoulder. "Yes, done." She stepped into the kitchen with me, lowering her voice. "I will file the necessary records in the morning. I will also prepare a letter that goes out the minute they try anything. Do not tell them yet. Do not warn them." "I will not," I said. Dana's gaze sharpened. "You must also follow his healthcare directives. The paperwork protects the money. Your choices now protect the truth." "I understand," I said, and I meant it. Dana left before dawn, headlights sweeping across the dark living room as she backed out of the driveway. I went back to Walter's bedside. The house was warmer now, but his body was fading, like the warmth had arrived too late to matter. Late morning, the pain surged again. His fingers clawed at the blanket and his breath turned ragged. I called hospice, insisted on emergency comfort medication delivery, used my work voice, the one that makes people stop explaining and start moving. And Evan called me back within minutes. "A courier is on the way," he said. "And Lila, I documented the description. I documented the condition of the home. I need you to tell me if the family returns." "They will not," I said. "Not today." "Okay," he said softly. "Stay with him." When the courier arrived, I signed, checked the seal, and administered the medication under Evan's guidance. Walter's body eased in small increments. His forehead smoothed. The tightness around his mouth loosened. He looked at me with gratitude that felt too heavy to carry. "Read," he whispered. "What do you want?" I asked. He blinked slowly. "Anything, just your voice." I sat beside him and read from an old paperback I found on his nightstand, a worn copy with notes in the margins. I didn't know why that book mattered, but it did. I read until the words blurred, then read some more, letting the steady rhythm fill the room where fear had been. Around midday, his breathing changed. The pauses between breaths lengthened. His eyes stayed half open, not focusing on anything in the room, but on something farther away. I held his hand and kept talking. "You are not alone. You are not a burden. You did enough." His fingers tightened once, a small squeeze, then loosened. The next breath did not come. I waited. I counted in my head, the way hospice workers learn to do. 10 seconds, 20, 30. The silence was complete. "Evan," I said when he answered, and my voice was steadier than I felt. "He is gone." "I'm sorry," he said, and I could hear his own fatigue behind the sympathy. "I will dispatch the nurse. Are you safe?" "Yes, and I have paperwork." "Good," he said. "That matters." The hospice nurse arrived, confirmed what I already knew, and walked me through the next steps. Walter had signed his healthcare proxy years ago. He had also signed authorization for disposition, and he had been clear about his wishes. No service, no gathering, no show. The funeral home pickup was quiet, paperwork and soft voices, a stretcher rolling down the hallway where the blankets had finally made the house feel human again. When the door closed behind them, the house felt hollow, not cold this time, hollow. That evening, the cremation was arranged under the authorization already on file. Fast, efficient, exactly what Walter wanted. There would be no stage for anyone to stand on and perform grief they didn't earn. The next morning, Dana called me from her office. "The amendment is recorded," she said. "It is in the system. I also sent notice to the trustee file. Now we build the rest of the wall." Evan emailed documentation of the disrupted visits, with dates and notes, and language that did not accuse but made the truth impossible to ignore. Ruth came by with a trembling hand and signed a statement that she had not seen Patrice or Grant at the home for 10 days, that the house had been dark at night, that she had worried. She looked at me when she finished. "I should have called someone," she whispered. "You are here now. That is what matters." By late afternoon, the funeral home called. Walter's ashes were ready. I drove there in silence and carried the urn out with both hands, heavier than it should have been for what it contained. Back at the house, I set it on the coffee table in the living room, the same room where Walter had been left to freeze. I laid out what I had, not like a display, not like a performance, but like a record. The amendment folder, the bank statements printed and highlighted, Evan's documentation, Ruth's signed statement, the video recording file saved and backed up. Evidence, not anger. When I stepped back, the living room looked almost normal. Warmth in the vents, clean carpet, quiet. Only the urn made it impossible to pretend nothing had happened. I turned off my phone, sat in the armchair across from the table, and waited, listening to the house settle around me, ready for the next door that would open. Chapter 5. Karma doesn't announce itself. The sound of tires on gravel came just after 3 in the afternoon, slow and unhurried, like people returning from a trip that had gone exactly as planned. I did not move from the armchair. I listened as doors opened and closed, as voices drifted closer, as the front door finally swung wide. Patrice stepped in first, sunglasses still on, a canvas tote slung over her shoulder. Grant followed with a rolling suitcase, his phone pressed to his ear, laughing at something on the other end of the line. They stopped when they saw me. Patrice blinked, scanning the room, taking in the clean carpet, the warmth in the air, the table set with neat stacks of paper. Her eyes landed on the urn. "Where is Walter?" she asked, already frowning. I did not stand. I lifted my hands and pointed. She followed my finger, her face drained of color, then flushed red in a single breath. "What is that?" she said, though she already knew. "That is him," I said. My voice surprised me with how even it sounded. Grant took a step forward, then stopped. "What do you mean, that is him?" "He died," I said, 3 days ago." Patrice let out a sharp sound that might have been a sob if it had not turned so quickly into anger. "You did this without telling us," she said. "You had no right." The front door opened again and Dana walked in, calm, professional, carrying a slim folder. She nodded to me and took a seat at the table without asking. "I am Dana Klein," she said. "I represent Walter's estate." Patrice stared at her. "We did not ask for a lawyer." Dana opened the folder. "You did not need to." She began to read, her voice steady, precise. She read the amended distribution of the living trust, the reasons cited, the effective date. She read the names of the beneficiaries. When she reached the part that excluded Patrice and Grant entirely, the room went very still. Patrice shook her head. "This is a lie," she said. "He would never do this." Dana looked up. "He did." Patrice's eyes filled with tears, and for a moment I wondered if she would finally say something honest. Instead, she turned toward me. "You betrayed us," she said. "You waited until he was weak." I said nothing. Grant ran a hand through his hair. "Everyone makes mistakes," he said. "We were under a lot of pressure. You know how hard things have been." I reached for the first stack of paper and slid it across the table. "These are the bank statements. 10 days of spending. Resorts, restaurants, shopping." Grant's mouth opened, then closed. I placed the next item down. "This is the video call. You can hear what you said." Patrice's eyes flicked to the phone on the table, like it might bite her. "This is hospice documentation," I continued. "Missed visits, no access to the home, no response." Dana slid Ruth's signed statement forward, and this is a witness. Patrice's hands began to shake. "You planned this," she said. "No," I said. "You did." Grant took a step toward me. "Can I talk to you alone?" Dana raised an eyebrow, but did not stop him. I followed Grant into the kitchen, the space where I had stood days earlier, fighting to keep my anger contained. He leaned against the counter, suddenly smaller. "You know how my mother is," he said. "She panics. I was just trying to keep things calm. I told you you drained his medication." Grant swallowed. "It was expensive." "I told you you turned off the heat." "We were gone," he said weakly. "I told you you left him." He looked at the floor. "I did not think it would get that bad." I met his eyes. "You chose." There was nothing else to say. When we returned to the living room, Patrice was pacing, crying now in earnest, talking about family and loyalty and how this would ruin her. Dana waited until she finished, then closed the folder. "The trust is recorded. Any attempt to contest it will trigger immediate legal action." Patrice stared at the urn one last time, then at me. "I hope you can live with this." "I can," I said. They left within an hour. Grant dragged his suitcase back to the car. Patrice did not look back. When the door closed, the house went quiet again. Not the cold, abandoned quiet from before, a settled quiet. I walked to the window and opened it. Cold air rushed in, sharp and clean. It did not scare me this time. It felt earned. I looked at the urn, at the papers, at the space where a man had suffered and where the truth had finally been spoken out loud. I did not feel victorious. I felt finished. If you were in my place, standing in that room, would you have done anything differently?